Welcome to the August meeting of the Zonta Says Now Intercontinental think tank. My name's Carol Theobald, and I have the privilege of leading the International Zonta Says Now working group. I'm hosting this meeting today from Western Australia. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute during the presentations, and you are welcome to make any comments or ask any questions in the chat line. We will record today's meeting, but conversations in the breakout rooms will not be in the final recording. As you can see, we've got a full program, so let's begin. We're delighted to welcome you all, especially we see our International President Uta Schultz is with us today, and also the first timers to the think tank. Please use the chat line to say hello and where you are from and your local time. Each month, we highlight a United Nations International Day. And did you know that yesterday was the World Humanitarian Day, a time to acknowledge the humanitarian aid workers throughout the world and think about their safety and security. They do a marvellous job of advocating for the survival, well-being and dignity of people affected by crises and are often working in very challenging environments. This year's theme is that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the people we serve, no matter what. Our Intercontinental think tank is coordinated by our Zonta Says Now working group. I'm delighted that Pamela Morgan and Joan Kabayambi have recently joined the team. Pamela is the Zonta International Chair of the United Nations Committee, and Joan is Zonta International's representative of the United Nations Environment Programme in Nairobi. It's great to have you on board and on board today. Our co-host today will be Karin Lange in Germany, who will be our guest speaker, and Pia Holtgren in Sweden, Dilruba Ahmed in Bangladesh, Joan Kabayambi in Uganda, and Angela Brockman, Bobby Cardillo, and Julie Trone in the USA. I'll now ask Dilruba from Bangladesh to explain why Zonta Says Now. You're on mute, Dilruba.
Thank you, Carol. Yes. Let us take a minute to remind ourselves why Zonta Says Now to gender equal climate action. This train,
keep going, I'll do the slides.
This train was built during the Industrial Revolution, a time when humans started to put more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. Now, yes. Will you click, Carol?
Yes, I've done it. I'm away. You're fine.
Yes. That are accumulating a blanket around the planet and causing global warming and associated extreme weather events, extreme droughts, fires, floods, and storms trigger social disruption, causing millions of people to lose their livelihoods and homes. This social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. Zonta Says Now stops the train by taking climate action and closing the gender gaps. We use 3 tools to achieve this. 1, our website, our think tank, and our framework for action. We have many resources and are guided by the Zonta International Statement on Climate Change. I'll now hand over to Angela Brookman from Kentucky in the USA, who will explain what has happened since the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilruba. And this is what we've been doing since our last meeting. After the last international think tank, we forwarded the links to the 3 draft action guides for feedback. The guides have now been uploaded on zonta.org. We can update the guides in the future as we get more ideas to add to them. We now also have 2 leaflets for the Framework for Gender Equal Climate Action. The first describes the 5 actions in the framework. For action, gather the facts, lead by example, use our voice, advocate, and collaborate, and has a grid on the back that is useful for workshops. The second leaflet answers frequently asked questions about the framework. The latest Zonta International newsletter promotes the Zonta Says Now resource area, but more about that later. Remember, you can access Zonta Says Now resources by going to the zonta.org and selecting our causes from the top menu and choosing Zonta Says Now from the drop-down list. At our last meeting, we said we would circulate the baseline surveys of members, club presidents, and district governors after Zonta International had released the strategic plan. The strategic plan was released a couple of weeks ago, and it was very pleasing to see that under goal number 1, Zonta Says Now will be the flagship campaign to address climate justice. The surveys were released on 18 August, so please complete the survey and return it as soon as you can. The closing windows for the survey is the 21st of September. Thank you all, and I will now hand it over to Pia Hultgren from Sweden to introduce our first speaker.
But before we do that, Angela, I just want to put in a little advert here that we've put together a draft campaign communication plan for Zonta Says Now, and we need some enthusiastic, fun-loving volunteers to help feed social media with articles and posts. So if you'd like to help out with this, please indicate your interest in the chat line or email me at info@zontasaysnow.org.au. Okay, I'll hand over now to Pia. Sorry about that, Angela.
Thank you, Angela and Carol. And this gives me the great pleasure to introduce Karin Lange. Karin is based in Germany and is a member of the Zonta Club of Berlin. 1989, it was founded in District 27. Karin is a PR consultant and freelance journalist specializing in political communication, corporate communication, and science communication, focusing on medicine and healthcare. Her clients to date as a PR consultant have included federal ministries, research institutions, corporations, and non-profit organizations. As a freelance journalist, Karin has worked for public television and radio, among others. In recent years, Karin has used her experience and skills to raise awareness and educate on innovative treatments for cartilage damage, report on research into congenital heart defects, and spread the word about joyful and relieving AI-based serious game solutions for dementia patients and their relatives. Karin speaks German, English, and Spanish, and is a board member of a film festival called Around the World in 14 Films. Zontanians have benefited enormously from Karin's talents, as she is the press spokesperson for the Union of German Zonta Clubs, the UN Advocacy Chair for District 27, and a valued member of the Zonta Says Now working group. Karin's advice and technical expertise laid the foundation for the international rollout of Zonta Says Now. Please use the chat line if you have any questions. Over to you, Karin.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for your nice introduction, and hello, everybody. welcome. Have a wonderful evening now together with us. And yes, I want to take you on a small journey. So I have to now share my screen. I hope that works and you can see something. Okay. So let's go to this. Okay, that's the presentation you see right now.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start. Well, first of all, I would like to welcome you to my beautiful small country. Also, in order to introduce you a little bit to some key facts regarding special conditions and also challenges for our climate policy. From there, we then take a look of how climate change is affecting Germany, especially in terms of gender injustice. And the last two stops we are going to take of our 15 minutes German tour are referring, of course, to this year's Zonta This Now key topic, which is disaster risk reduction and our action on nationwide level. Yes, a short travel info still. I had mistakenly assumed that I have 20 minutes. So there's a lot of information now and I condensed it a little bit and I will skip some things, but later on you can read it then with leisure. Well, let's start and let us visit this small red place of our amazingly beautiful planet. One of the places that since its industrialization has contributed substantially to unbalance our global ecosystem. Come and visit my home base, Berlin, our capital city. That's the seat of our government and as well the seat of 3 Zonta clubs. The Zonta Club Berlin, the Zonta Club Berlin 1989, which I belong to, and the Zonta Club Berlin Mitte. And guess what? Berlin is the greenest capital city in Europe with over 2,500 green spaces. So the disused Tempelhof Airport, for instance, today known as Tempelhofer Field, is home to endangered bird species and in the summer a farm sheep herd. And it is the largest inner city open space in the world. And thus also our largest urban park. Berlin is also a water city as well with 50 lakes, 3 rivers, 8 canals, and 1,000 bridges. Fun fact, these are more bridges than Venice has got. Yes, and Berlin's goal is to be considered climate neutral by 2050. And beyond Berlin, well, there is a great variety of landscapes and a huge biodiversity as well. The German forests are a very important climate factor. German forests relieve the atmosphere of 127 million tons of CO2 every year, and this figure corresponds to 14% of all German greenhouse gases or gas emissions. So that's not a lot, but it is something. And in its latest recommendations for action, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has prioritized not only the expansion of renewables, but as well the protection and expansion of forests. And unfortunately, the consistent implementation of these priorities encounters specific obstacles in Germany. Yes. In 2022, Germany is one of the 20 most populous countries in the world, and thus ranks 19th in global comparison. By average, on 1 square kilometer are living more than 230 people in Germany. But with the expansion of settlement, of course, and of traffic areas, soil sealing is increasing, which counteracts the recommended renaturation of land and results in a loss of important soil functions like water permeability and soil fertility. Well, you can imagine 14 federal states covering 11,000 municipalities, including 2,055 cities, are taking part in our democratically decision processes. This is a huge challenge sometimes. And you also might know that, of course, our prosperity depends on a climate unfriendly industry. The automotive nation has missed the boat on climate-friendly innovations, and the phase-out of fossil fuels like coal, gas, and oil came too slowly and too late. While Germany is famous for its innovation and engineers and its strong economy, it ranks 19th in terms of CO2 emissions per inhabitant among the Group 20 countries. The implementation of an ambitious program is urgently needed. The recent flood disaster in Western Germany illustrates the effects of such developments all too drastically. Yes, 2 years ago, 134 people died in this flood. And so we, for the first time, could make out that a lot more people recognized climate change as a phenomenon. It was a long time a little bit denied. Also in Germany, we already talked in our group about it, that this happens in many countries. It was a little bit ignored, and the increasing weather extremes caused by global warming were not taken seriously. Psychologically, perhaps, this is nothing to be surprised by. Our brains are trained to reserve all energies for emergencies. No action is taken before then. But at the latest, with this disaster and the consequences of the war against Ukraine, which had a huge impact on our energy supply, this has changed. And one topic is increasingly coming into focus: gender equal climate policy. Germany aims to become a climate neutral industrial nation by 2045. And for many people, this sounds very, very late. But on June 21, recently, the German cabinet submitted a departmental draft of a climate protection program. And a couple of weeks ago, Robert Habeck, who is our Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Protection and responsible for all climate policy in Germany, stated, in shaping climate policy in the future, all actors should pay more attention to the interaction of climate change and gender roles. Will we see a climate protection program that takes gender equal action? Yeah, we are really curious because, okay, on the one hand, good news, yes, we achieved to decrease a little bit our use of fossil energies, and we have got a lot of renewable energy in the use. But you see that it has risen until 41%. But on the other hand, we all know there's still a lot to do. And of course, they have to count on us as women. This is now a lot of text. Don't worry, you can read it afterwards. But I wanted to tell you that the German Women's Council had some recommendations. Actually, these recommendations were made by experts and by a lot of people who met in June within a great conference. And there are four very important points I want to show you when it comes to women in Germany and why they are particularly disadvantaged and what needs to be done. And so they are recommending, for instance, that we should establish a gender equal and social mobility. Mobility. Why is that? Because we still are very car-centric. We still have a very car-centric transport policy, and that doesn't help many women. And then there are certain company car privileges we think that we probably don't need. So women are more in favor, and they need more space for pedestrians, cyclists, children, and people with disabilities in our country, which has a wonderful public transport as well, which has to be developed further. And another point is, and that's also a very crucial factor, that we need to build new structures for an ecological work and economy. It's all about balancing lifetime earnings, because in Germany, women earn 49% less than men during their lifetime, and that's a lot. And the same goes to the topic of care work. Women, by average, care almost 1.5 hours more daily than men. And yes, so we think there's, I think, the recommendation to for targeted qualification of women in future industries, alternative working time models, equal participation in companies. I make it a little bit more short now. The buildings and the construction, this is also a really interesting topic, because you can imagine that women are significantly don't have so much money to pay for the high energy costs in Germany. And they may live more often in buildings which don't have high energy standards, like air conditioning, for instance, or like green spaces. So these all needs more political participation, as Zonta says also, or states in its very famous statement on climate change. And in Germany, this is really a factor, because at the national level, you must know that we have only a 35% of women in parliament. At the federal state level, it's even less. And at the municipal level, imagine only 1 out of 10 mayors is a woman. So let me bring it to a last point, which is very important, because it's something extraordinary to me. That our German basic law clearly states men and women shall have equal rights. The state shall promote the actual implementation of equal rights for women and men, and take steps to eliminate disadvantages that now exist. And there exist a lot of disadvantages. Also, if it comes to the topic of disaster risk reduction. Fires, droughts, floods, storms, and landslides are also on the rise in Germany. And there's a special thing, which is a heritage of our very dark history. There's still a lot of munition of the World War II buried in the ground. And this is increasingly becoming a major threat under conditions of drought and wildfires. Yes, and one other factor I want to point at as well, the Ahrtal catastrophe was caused also by a lack of coordination of an immediate disaster management. And here we go to our topic, because in Germany now, disaster management is regulated a new way. At present, all municipalities are revising their local disaster control systems. And of course, for disasters, you need an overlapping cooperation of administration, fire department, police, technical aid support by the so-called Technisches Hilfswerk, and so on. And yes, one of the interesting things is that they are also constructing or establishing so-called disaster lighthouses in many cities and municipalities, and these are intended to provide people shelter for the intended to provide shelter for the population, for the people, in case of, for instance, a total power blackout caused by a catastrophe. So, but at this point, if we figure at the fact that in Germany, still maximum at 20% of women are engaged in those sectors like STEM, and as well like firework or technical Hilfswerk. I think they have only a 16% of women. So you can imagine that there are not so many decision makers who bring in our topics. And we talked a lot about that. And in Germany, we of course face the same problems. So it's of course a question if these disaster lighthouses, for instance, are providing safe spaces to prevent from gender-based violence, how they are prepared for elderly, disabled or critically ill people in need of artificial respiration, for instance. Are there hygiene products and medicine for women? Is there a concept for pregnant women and nursing mothers? Well, so there is then time to action for us. And this comes with Zonta Says Now. And in Germany, there's a special thing. Advocacy in Germany is a structural challenge because our 138 Zonta clubs in Germany, with their 4,000 members, belong to 7 different areas. And these areas belong to 5 different districts. And each of these districts covers different countries. And not only countries of the European Union, also, of course, countries we want to have in, like Ukraine, or other countries like Lebanon. So you can imagine that there are very different conditions for advocacy. And we had to find a solution for that. And thanks to some of our Zontians in Germany, we found a solution for that. And the solution is the German Union of Zonta Clubs. And the good thing on this is that with all the clubs participating and with a nationwide character, we are having a voice in the German Women's Council. And we have a wonderful delegate there. And we also have a wonderful advocacy coordination and a press spokesperson. So this gives us the chance now to go 2 ways. The one way is to the municipals and on the communal and regional level, and the others from the nation-wide level. And we coordinate all our voices and make it very strong. And this happened to also draw the attention of a lot of NGOs and a lot of partners, and makes the things really work. And it's so wonderful to work within those 3 teams. Each has its special abilities, and we have their area representatives for advocacy, then subject matter experts, and delegates from Federal Women's Council. So that makes it very strong. And yeah, with this, we have a lot of support for our clubs and services to give them materials like the wonderful materials Zonta Says Now prepared and are on the website of Zonta International to take action. And why starting with a webinar? That's what we did in Germany. And you probably think, oh, okay, that's typical German, because they always want to prepare that very precisely and properly and so on. But I also have to say that our Zonta clubs in Germany are really very committed in terms of advocacy, and nearly all of them participate with a huge bunch of actions. And Zonta Says No, and not only once in autumn, but the whole year through. And that's not the only action they take. They have lots of. And Zonta Says Now is a new kid on the block for everybody, which also sounds a little bit similar to Zonta Says No, so that at the beginning was a little bit confusing. And so it was a challenging new task to introduce Zonta Says No, but for the clubs, of course, it's a challenging new task to implement it. And yes, and there's still, of course, a the need for raising a little bit the consciousness about the gender aspects of climate change. So that's where all those wonderful materials Zonta now provides are really helpful, like, for instance, the action framework. And this led us in the end at the webinar to discuss very simple actions every club can take. Address climate change in the club for the first time, yeah, also with those wonderful instruments. Establish a link in between Zonta and the own community. Mostly those links are still are already existing, no problem, but yeah, come together with what who is responsible in your community for disaster risk management, yeah, for instance, and determine as well the focus on disaster prevention, and then prepare the questions and invite responsible people from the community to a meeting, ask questions, discuss, and give suggestions. And I think I'd like to stop it now. I think it was a lot for you, because now I'm really curious for your questions and the discussion which follow today. So thank you so much for listening. And yes, I hand it over back to Pia.
Thank you, Karin. So exciting and good job you have started. And a great presentation. I think we all could have sit here for at least 30 minutes more, but we have a lot to do on the agenda. So now, John Kabayami from Uganda has been monitoring the chat line. Do we have any questions for Karin from the chat?
Thank you. Thank you. I have not received any questions. I just have good news. Members, about 7 have accepted and are willing to help with social media. No question as yet. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I will now hand over to Bobby Cardillo from the USA to introduce today's second presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Pia. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
It is my pleasure to introduce Marisa Mason-Smith. Marisa gave a presentation just a little while ago to the North American think tank and told us about what was happening with climate change and its effect on women in the Bahamas. And she was unable to be with us in person today, but has given us permission to use her presentation that she gave to the North American think tank. So let me tell you a little bit about Marisa and why she's a great person to be speaking to us on this topic. First of all, in her professional life, Marisa is an HR professional and executive coach. She is the CEO of People First International. In her Zonta life, Marisa is the president of the Zonta Club of New Providence, Bahamas, in District 11. And she is the Zonta Bahamas National Advocacy Chairman. In collaboration with the government, with the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, Zonta Bahamas led the first Women in Parliament session that commemorated the women's suffrage movement. Marisa is also the District 11 Area 3 UN representative for advocacy and women's affairs. She has many awards, but among them, the Zonta International Centennial Leadership and Advocacy Award. And from our perspective, probably her most striking credential is that she is an executive member of the Hurricane Preparedness and Disaster Team for the Caribbean Electric Utility Service Corporation. So she really should be able to help us understand disaster preparedness in the Bahamas. And so at this point, perhaps we can roll Marisa's audio presentation. And at the end, we'll see what questions you have.
Greetings from the Bahamas. It is truly a pleasure and joy to address you on this very special occasion on climate change. I want to congratulate each of you for your role and for the activities that you have been playing in making a difference around the world. The whole concept of climate change is being faced not just in the Bahamas, but around the world, and no other like the Bahamas. We all know that climate change is a multi-sectorial issue that causes major impacts to islands within the Caribbean region more often than realized. These issues tend to stem from the changes within the environment and factors like a rise in sea level and oceanic temperatures that lead to conditions that favor the development of the stronger and more frequent hurricanes and storm surges. When looking at the Bahamas, Hurricane Dorian made landfall in 2019 and caused the island nation $3.5 billion in debt. Yes, in the Caribbean, our major vulnerability to these forces is great, as we can only do so much to build resilience. The fact remains, when these storms hit our countries, the most we can do is evacuate early enough to sustain our lives, prepare hurricane kits to sustain us during times of storm, and pray that in the aftermath there is minimal loss of life and structure, and if this is not the case, enough support to try to rebuild from tragedy. We ask the question, how has gender inequality contributed to the problems faced to women and girls during and after climate disaster? Well, in the event of hurricane or flooding, do women know how to swim? As climate change continues to be the catalyst of climate disasters, it has been a growing reality that women and girls do face more challenges on a global scale as there is an increased vulnerability. Women and girls are less likely to survive during times of great climate distress and more likely to be injured due to gender inequalities that have created disparities in information, mobility, decision-making, and access to resources and preparedness survival training. Even in the aftermath of disasters, women and girls are less likely to have access relief and assistance, thus further threatening their livelihoods, well-being, and recovery, while creating a vicious cycle of vulnerability to future disasters. You may ask, have there been any particular actions taken by the government or local authorities to specifically help women during a climate emergency? According to the Bahamas Beijing Plus 25 National Review on the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action 2019, the Bahamas has begun to show progress in this regard by supported women's participation and leadership, including those affected by disasters, in disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and mitigation policies, programs, and projects. 1. Within this review, there was the indicated support directed towards women's participation and leadership, including those affected by disasters, in disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and mitigation policies, programs, and projects. The Bahamas is a part of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, which is an organ of CARICOM, and is comprised of 18 participating states. SEDEMA is pursuing a comprehensive disaster management strategy, 2014 to 2024. The cross-cutting theme of this strategy comprises of climate change and adaptation, information communication technology, gender mainstreaming, and environmental sustainability. It has also promoted access of women in situations of disaster to services such as relief payments, disaster insurance, and compensation. The Department of Social Services offers, in a limited capacity, a small business repair program that assists the most vulnerable, predominantly women and children, in the renovating and upkeep of private homes before and after times of natural catastrophes and disasters. DOS assesses the homes of persons applying for assistance and, where possible, make the necessary renovations to ensure that the basic standard of living is adhered to. Yes, we introduced or strengthened and implemented gender-responsive laws and policies related to disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and mitigation. Example, disaster laws addressing vulnerability of women in disaster. In 2015, the Bahamas government adopted the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030 to provide resources and implement gender-sensitive disaster risk reduction policies, plans, and programs to empower women for disaster preparedness and recovery. In 2018, the Department of Gender and Family Affairs staff collaborated with NEMA, United States Northern Command, and North American Aerospace Defense Command to engage in training and planning exercises for significant disaster risk reduction. Issues and concerns about gender mainstreaming of the policies were represented by the Department of Gender and Family Affairs staff and thus included in the manual document. Anything else you want to know about how climate has impacted women and girls in my country? When looking in how climate has impacted women in the Bahamas, more provisions are needed to be put in place to ensure that the women are safe and recovery of the vulnerable groups of people are a reality. This also is a reality that most of the households within the Bahamas are led by women. Thus, the brunt of climate-related disasters, preparedness, and recovery falls on the women. In this way, more access to capacity building, awareness resources, and inclusion of processes of national importance need to be factored into this discussion space. Ultimately, climate change continues to cause more of a challenge. It is therefore imperative that we all adopt the things that we can change, and its capacity and resources are not in place, then resilience cannot be achieved, and the most vulnerable amongst us will continue to suffer, our women and girls. I salute the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas as they have implemented many new strategies, providing much more training opportunities, have prepared safety kits, hurricane kits, signage, and also shelters that provide public awareness programs for persons who may feel that they are not safe in their homes, that they are able to go to those shelters and to be safe. They're provided with spiritual, religious, and other support during this time for them and their children. I thank you so much. We must do more. Our women and our children are our vulnerable populations, and we must ensure their safety at all times. It is very important that we focus on our women and to ensure that we are all safe in our environments. Thank you and have a great conference. Greetings, and I hope to see you all soon in the Bahamas.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that presentation. I'm sorry there was no visual and that Marisa could not be with us in person, but you have her audio and can go back over it. Joan, I wonder if there were any questions, and although Marisa is not here to answer them, perhaps Carol is willing to say something, or we can discuss in our groups when we get to that point. Are there questions?
Yes, please. Somebody is saying it is always a challenge for busy clubs to integrate service and advocacy along Zonta Says No and Zonta Says Now campaigns. So suggestions in regard to this. This is true at the district level. Then there's a question, emergency shelters have been in place in some communities for a while, but have communities updated the locations with a change in climate? Those are the two questions I have at the moment.
Well, I would just pipe in here and then I'll turn it to Carol, that I think the first question is something for us to discuss in our groups. How do we merge Zonta Says No and Zonta Says Now and all the other service and advocacy things we do? The second thing about emergency shelters, have they been updated? Has their location been updated with regard to paying attention to climate change? That's, I think, something for each of us to find out in our own communities when we work at the club level. Carol, you have any other thoughts?
I just noticed that Ben has his hand up. Ben, did you want to raise your question?
Yes.
Ben? You had your hand up? I wasn't sure.
Ben Mukasa, your hand is up.
No? Okay. And I think I want to get everybody into groups. I'll just hand over to Julie. If we just remember these discussion comments, and I'll just go forward over to Julie. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Carol. Quick note, Hasna has her hand up. Hasna, would you like to say something? There she goes.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment. No, sorry.
It's okay, we hear you fine.
Okay, I'm very interested in the contrast between Bahamas and Germany. You know, one tiny island and a huge country, Germany, does not only affect her own environment, but in many parts of the world, because we depend on Germany for certain export items, and then so in that way now, you know, we are getting fossil coal fuel is now being used in Germany, and because of the war in Ukraine. So the things are happening that affect not only Germany, but the rest of the world and to the globe particularly. And my thoughts are that, you know, we have also these two economies are very different from the Asian and Pacific low island countries, where their whole existence will depend on how the rest of the world behaves. So that perspective should be there, that some countries will drown, will perish, and some countries will continue to struggle. I mean, most of the countries will make it, but then some countries will not. So that point is now here, and we need to address that urgently. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasna. That's an excellent point. To me, it just reigns true that we're all connected and we're all reliant on each other for goods and services, for economies. So very good points. And also pretty sad if you think about it, because of the countries that rely on everybody to do the climate action, and it's not being done as much as we need it to be done. With that note, thank you for sharing with us. We really appreciate that. And thanks to Bobby for throwing it to me, and I really appreciate Karin's perspective and listening to Marisa. Two different, very different geographical regions. So now we have some time to reflect on what we have heard today with other Zontians. I hope you'll stick around and chat. This is how we use our voice. This is how we collaborate, and this is how we create action. We want to know what resonated with you. We want to know how you feel about the situations in Germany, the Bahamas, and other parts of the world. And so Carol's going to put us into groups, and we have group leaders that will monitor and take notes, and we can talk about what's on your mind, how you're feeling, and where we can go with this.
Julie.
On to you, Carol.
Sorry, before we go into groups, I noticed that Uta had her hand up. Uta, did you want to share your comment?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you all for attending, and thank you all for what you're doing for climate action. I want to focus on one point, which is for me very important, is that now with Joanne Kawajami, we have a seat at the Nairobi Environment Program, which is a very important step ahead. And we were working 1 year now since the beginning of this biennium to get this seat and to get Joanne accredited in Nairobi, and now happy to contribute and to proceed. And perhaps you also attended the sessions on the strategic plan that we had. We had one session just yesterday and the other one last week, and we will report about this at the district conferences, because climate justice is one of the key topics in the strategic plan. So we anchored it here in our journey in Zonta till 2030 and beyond. So it will follow us over the next years. And I'm also happy that we really could emphasize it here. You also mentioned, Karin, you mentioned the German Union. I would like to add the USA caucus, the Canada caucus. And I think it is very crucial for all of you who are listening around the world that we should have more of these unions or caucuses where we can raise our voice on country level. I know, for instance, in Australia, you also have 3 districts in Australia. It could be an idea to have a caucus in Australia, but also in other countries. Just put us together. It's our districts are not combined with our country borders. So let us have more a look at the caucuses and on country unions, what we should do. And I really love the idea, what you are doing, to have a look at disaster plans, at emergency shelters, because this is, from my point, this is something what can really be done by every Zonta club in every country, in every city. There is no excuse. So we all can have a look at that. What does our local community is doing? And I tell you, I was a lawyer over decades in local community, and I know how these disaster plans are made and who is doing them. And most of them are men. And from my experience over the last decades, I know we never had a look at women's issues. So this is really a big point for me, where we can involve every Zonta club, and we have to ask them, and we have to demand, look at that, because that is the first step to bring climate issues and climate justice into the forefront of our communities. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to raise these 4 points, which are really important from my perspective. Thank you very much, Karin.
No problem. Well, I'm going to put everybody into breakout room. Right, I think we've got most people back. We'll go back over to Julie. Is she back yet? Let me just check.
I'm back. We had such a rich discussion, and one of our members was cut off during this important comment. So my apologies, Saren. And we got the gist of what you're saying. I really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is talk about the feedback. There are some key points in every group. I'm going to start, and then I'll throw it to our other group monitors. So everyone talked, and I could probably go forever, but I know I don't have that kind of time, and I do appreciate everyone in my group very, very much. So Joan was there, and we started with Mafusa talking about climate action they did that used the framework, but wasn't necessarily going by the framework, but everything she said was part of the framework for Zonta Says Now. So if Carol, while I'm talking, you could throw in where everyone can get a copy of the framework in the chat, and that way everyone can download that. So they did a plastic project, got leaders, people in the community, and they're working on information gathering and how is it affecting women and girls, and this is a problem, we need to fix it. They're doing great work in Bangladesh. Joan then came in and said, the UNEP meeting this week is about plastic pollution. So that was pretty awesome, because she said she's reading about it and she really loved hearing what Mafusa in Bangladesh and her club was doing. And she wants a framework. And then we kept going about asking questions. How do you incorporate Zonta Says No and Zonta Says Now? And we talked, each person talked about various things, mostly about disaster risk management and how in some parts of the world, people are not seeing great effects of climate change, so they're not really embracing that. But there's advocacy happening. Suzanne from Germany said they had leaders come in and they were like, where are the women when you're talking about disaster prep? These are great questions, asking where are the women, who's making decisions? Did you consider women and girls when you created this evac shelter? Ina talked about 2 great pillars to tie everything together, which is disaster action plans and raising awareness. Great advocacy. Carol from Wisconsin liked the partnership aspect, because she felt like, and I think many of us do, I think this is my last comment. Many of us in Zonta, in our local level, excuse me, that must mean I have to stop talking, don't have a big reach for people knowing who we are and what we do. And so she said partnerships help get the word out and we collaborate. Excuse me. And so that's it. So I'm going to throw it to Bobby.
Okay, I'm unmuted. All right. Oh, we had a rich discussion, went a lot of directions. First of all, Maria reminded us that Hurricane Hillary is the first tropical storm ever to hit the United States on the West Coast. And so climate change is quite clearly evident to our population. Then Kay talked about the Marshall Fire, which came within 2 kilometers of her home in Boulder, Colorado. And that organizations are learning to coordinate and support the disaster, both preparedness and reconstruction, I guess, but that the Zonta Club in the area hasn't quite become involved yet. So we need to encourage clubs to start becoming involved, especially when there is a disaster in their area. Kay went on to talk about the example of Clara Barton, who started the Red Cross in the United States, and that she talked about how did she know where to go? How did she know where to go to bring the medical supplies? Well, she went to where the sounds of the gunfire were. And that's what we need to do. We need to go to the actual where things are happening. And at the local level, Uta talked about we have to go to the actual county or local organization that is taking care of disaster planning and ask them a lot of questions and then see where we can fit in our answers. But we have to start by finding out who is responsible and then ask them a lot of questions. And that Zonta Says Now is going to help us narrow down these questions so that clubs will have sort of a roadmap for going in to do that. And then once we do find out what's happening in our communities, we need to figure out, are there women involved in doing this already? And if not, obviously there should be women involved. What about Zonchans becoming involved? What about Zonchans being volunteering to be involved in the disaster preparedness organizations of the county or the city? Let's see. And then we talked about the fact that working on the local level on disaster issues, we can gain visibility, but we can also perhaps do service in addition to advocacy. Mm-hmm. And then Kate mentioned that our strength has been in scholarships. We need to continue to consider scholarships in the STEM field so that the women that, we are supporting young women to get into this field. I guess another comment was in Cincinnati, a woman got on the commission, or a woman supervisor was elected to government. She created a commission for women and girls, and that commission included young people in the schools, and they recognized the fact that the schools didn't have period products available for young girls, and many were not coming to school for that reason in the United States, in the Cincinnati area. So they took that on and they made a difference. They started making that provided. And then Linda talked about in Ghana how period products are now being taxed, and that this is something that perhaps the Zonchans can fight against, working together, because this is clearly something that's needed. And a whole bunch of other things. I will turn it over to the next speaker at this point.
Thank you, Bobby. And let's go to Pia.
Okay, yes, we have fantastic, interesting discussions as well. And everybody had to spoke in our group, and we were interrupted in the end by when Pat Jarrett from Alaska was speaking and explaining how climate change are so obvious. I mean, in that latitudes, it's 2 to 3 times more heating than the average on the globe. So it's clearly obvious, and the tundra is melting, and their problem, confusing when they want to do more oil, find more oil resources, and they can't do it because the heavy equipment they need and won't be held by the thunder. And yeah, it's really hard. It's hard not to be overwhelmed. And it's one Zonta Club in Alaska, and I imagine that you are very engaged to these questions. And we had Jane in our group. Do you want to say something, Jane? Jane is or was in our working group, but yeah.
I wanted to point out that how important it is, a lot of you are speaking, to make the issues of climate change and our actions very relevant within your own community. As we were talking about earlier, go to your local emergency places, what's going on, but how is it affecting your community? How will it affect your community? But we've got to make it relevant to our members. I certainly have members in our District 7 that are skeptical, not interested, but we have to engage them to recognize that climate change is relevant, and in particular is relevant to all the women's issues that we care about in Zonta.
Thank you, Jane. And we also had Bistra Liva from Bulgaria, from Sofia, and it seems like you in your club and your district already have started a good work with Zonta Says Now in your country, and you have a program that you maybe would like to share to us, and you can email Carol about that, some education program, university program. That was right, I think. And fantastic. Do you want to say something, Bistra?
Thank you, Pia. Yes, I'm happy to share our program because we established this program with Sofia University. And through this program, we want to inform our Zontians and society about the law, how we can be more in action, how we can be advocacy and stay stability of this topic. That's why we can share our program with you too. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can put it on the webpage or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, we also had Terju Sarela, a Finnish name, but she from Chicago, I think. And we also spoke a lot about this confusion wait a minute. the problem people that actually work in fossil fuel environments and in industries, and that they are threatened. I mean, almost the same problem as in Germany we have in our industrial countries. So it's really a big problem. And we had Judith also speaking a lot about disaster plans. We discussed that, and that's very relevant for the big fires going on at the moment. So I think that was all from our group.
Thank you, Pia.
Thank you.
A lot of rich discussions. This is wonderful. Let's throw it over to Dilruba, got tongue-tied there, to see what happened in her group.
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I was discussing about our latest floods and rains that, struck our country and how we managed the disaster. Actually, one was not really geared that way. The climate, sometimes the computer gives you wrong information, 80% rain or 20% rain. So you just know that this is the monsoon season, it rains, but it rains so heavily for 3-4 days that the whole city and the adjacent areas got flooded, and disaster management was very, very little. Because everyone was, taken aback, and they really didn't know what to do. They had to wade in the water, absolutely waist deep, and we have the children and the elderly women, take them off from their homes and put them in a shelter. So this is a lesson for us to be prepared for such kind of weather in the future. Now, it is very relevant that climate change has affected and is affecting them. So from our club, Zonta Club, today there was a project that we did, that rehabilitation. We gave out, things for the home like bamboos, because it is in the area where they have these thatched houses. So we try to make little small buildings, but all with tin roofs. Well, otherwise it would be very expensive and we couldn't collect money. So I think I'm going to take back a lot of information from the discussions held and be more prepared and involve the Zonta clubs in our areas to be more alert and be more giving and be more conscious. Because there is always a difference between Zonta says no and Zonta says now. So now they're beginning to realize that the time is now to embrace Zonta says now. So I think our work that we are doing will take off and will be absolutely relevant for today's time. Just not the floods or the rains, but also, you know, getting the women involved in policy making, or disaster planning and and all this with the government will be helpful. And we as Zontians, as leading advocates in our areas, we can plan to talk to the local authorities how to combat this kind of problems when we are faced with. I hope that the next season, next time, it won't be so bad. When we have an alert, we must make sure that all these people are taken to some sort of shelter with food, packed food, so that they don't go hungry for days. It was a terrible condition. And I know we got a lot of, we had a lot of appeals, but most countries are now facing so much problem. Heat in Spain and all this thing, we read about it and we all realize that it's just due to climate change. So this is what I had to say.
Thank you, Daruba. And I'll go ahead and start on mine. We had a very interactive conversation in our group. One of the things that came out was New Zealand has acknowledged that they now have a cyclone season, which they haven't had a cyclone season before. And then Bangladesh addressed that they now have a dry season and people don't know what to do with that, how to act, how to take care of themselves. And on both of these, the poor people are affected the most, but after these disasters is when you see the major uptick on violence against women, which then led our conversation to how dated our disaster management plans are in most countries. One of the case in point was the fire in Hawaii. They didn't sound the alarm because they were conditioned for those alarms to go to the mountains, which meant they would have gone right into the fire. And now we have to look at how are our alert systems working? Are they manageable to what we need now currently? And how do we go about re-educating people to what those alarms mean? Not only are the alarm systems concerned, but then the shelters. Do we have enough room? Do we have water? Do we have toilets? Do we have food? What are the designs of our shelters as we move forward for taking care of what's coming forward to us from the climate issues? So major topics, a lot of work to do, but we are all strapped in and prepared to help do the work. Karin, you're up next, dear.
Karin, can you make your feedback short?
Okay,
yes. We're running out of time.
Well, yeah, I think yeah, in my group today it was a little bit difficult due to sound problems, so we couldn't really hear everything. But one thing, yes, came from our Zonta friend of Switzerland, Annette Di Rosa, who told me that kind of those lighthouses, those catastrophe lighthouses, these were invented in Switzerland, yeah, during the Cold War, I think everywhere. probably in Switzerland, yes, and she just wanted to know how ours look like. And I only know that, for instance, in Berlin, these are city halls, for instance, and other public spaces who are used, which are used as such shelters. But yeah, that's a thing to ask. And I had the impression that it's a way to go if you start with Zonta Says Now, as Uta already stated. So there's nothing new. I think it's a good way to start action and to get into the topic, to ask in your communities. Another point to me, which was also striking, and that was, what Dee Croft from Ontario told me a little bit, that of course they are suffering a hell from wildfires and stuff, and it's still new to them. That's what I heard. It's completely new to them to engage with Zonta Says Now, and they are looking for that. And so I think it's very good to keep on with our discussions here, these intercontinental discussions, to learn from each other. And I loved also Husna, who, yes, told against that, please, let's exchange on that. These are different situations, of course, in Germany and in the Bahamas and other island states, and we have to work together in a certain way. And I'm so happy about what Ute said, that we now have also another connection on the UN level. And I think so that's a good place for such topics, if it comes to how can we support on international level. But therefore, it's also so important to come together here, to exchange, and then to know, okay, there's a problem concerning the situation of women and girls. And probably we can have an exchange with our UN committees. And so. Okay, that's what I can say from my part, and thanks to all who participated in this group and contributed.
Christine, did you want to just briefly share what you were talking about in your group? Christine? Are you still there?
Yes, I can do that quite quickly. Look, we're all keen to learn from each other about what we can do in our local clubs, and that's why a number of people joined the discussion today. We thought Uta's idea about looking at local disaster risk management plans and looking at how women are catered for, involved in those, is a good place to start. We also thought that raising visibility of Zonta and what we are doing with respect to Zonta Says Now in our local communities is something that has to happen for two reasons. One, in order to raise awareness of the issues at local level, and in doing that, we need to find something that's relevant at the local level. Like in Germany, the fires raised people's awareness of what was happening with the climate. We need to find something in our local communities to engage people in discussion. And then just finally, quickly, we looked at Annegret in Germany. Their club is discovered that there are a lot of women in flats who are energy poor, and they're looking at how they can assist them to access local programs to alleviate that situation. And in my club, we're looking at homelessness. These issues all tie in with climate change. Women need to be safe in the world that we are entering now. So in a nutshell, that was our discussion.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Well, we're running a little bit over time, so we'll just quickly just finish off with what we were, a couple of other items. You should have all received the latest Zonta news in your inbox. This edition focused on Zonta Says Now activities, including the framework for action and a recommended reading list, and Zonta International's accreditation with the United Nations Environment Programme. And as I mentioned earlier, Joan Kabayambi will be the Zonta International representative on the UNEP. And also in the Zonta news, We read about the Zontas from the Zonta Clubs of Thornhirna and Akureyri in Iceland, who partnered with Seroptimus to host Women in Environment Forum, and Zontas from the Zonta Club of Tuguegarao in the Philippines, who have been creating shaded community spaces using fruit trees and bamboo. Congratulations to everyone involved. And don't forget to share your stories with Zonta International. I'd like to quickly share 3 court cases that are being brought by young people around the world. International Director René Koppok brought the first case to my attention. René can't be with us today, but this is what the case is about. In 2020, 16 young residents aged 2 to 18 alleged the Montana state government in the USA had their pro-fossil fuel policies contributed to climate change and violated the state's constitution that guaranteed the state and each person shall maintain and improve a clean and healthful environment in Montana for present and future generations. As a result of the evidence and personal testimonies presented in the case, the judge ruled that Montana state agencies were violating the young people's constitutional right by allowing fossil fuel development. This was the first case of this type in the USA to go to trial, and others are pending throughout the USA. In Australia, we had a similar case where we had Anjali Sharma in the pictured here with 8 other teenagers took the Minister for the Environment to court, saying that when she was considering the expansion of coal mining projects, that she had a duty of care to protect young people from the impacts of climate change. The evidence presented in that case means that climate change is now accepted in all Australian courts as a real threat to future generations. It does not have to be discussed in a court anymore. The case in the courts was lost on appeal, but Anjali did not give up. She's now working with the senator in the Australian Federal Parliament to amend the Climate Change Act so that government will have to have a duty of care to protect young people from the impacts of climate change. Good on Anjali, only 19, and she's creating new laws in Australia. The third one is even bigger. 6 young people in Portugal, they're taking 32 countries, yes, 32 countries, to the European Court of Human Rights for failing to do their part to avert the climate catastrophe. This case has been going since 2020, and the next hearing takes place on the 27th of September. There is a very short video on it, but I
Most of us agree that we need to act. We feel the urgency. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. Look at the droughts, the floods, the fires.
finally today, please consider donating to the foundation and to the endowment fund whenever you can. You can donate to thank speakers, celebrate a friendship, or even acknowledge the changing seasons. Any excuse is a good excuse to give a donation to the foundation. So our next meeting will be held on Sunday, the 17th of September, from 12 to 1:30 UTC. Please register for this meeting now so that the date will be in your calendar. And the slides and video from today's meeting will be uploaded to our working page at the Intercontinental think tank page at District 23 Zonta Says Now website in the next couple of days. So thank you again to Karin for your presentation and to Marisa for sharing her talk to the North American Interdistrict meeting. And thank you to everyone for your great participation today. Our discussions give us lots to think about and inspire us to take action in our clubs. Remember, through our gender equal climate action, we are building a better world for women and girls. If you've not already done so, please complete and submit your Zonta Says Now survey and check out the Zonta Says Now resources on the website. I put a link in the chat line to the international ones. If you have any questions, please email me at info@zontasaysnow.org.au. But until next month, keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun. Bye.